All right. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining today's Space Syntax Lab seminars. And today we'd like to welcome Ha Tai, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology's School of Architecture and Urban Design, where he also conducted his PhD in architecture and urban design. Prior to his PhD at the RMIT, he completed a master's in architecture from the Hanoi Architectural University in Vietnam, as well as a master's in urban design from the Newcastle University here in the UK. Ha has published on topics of urban morphology, space syntax, and informality, with a particular focus on Hanoi, such as his recent publications on mapping and measuring spatial connectivity of the pathways to home-based businesses within informal urban contexts, or the resilience of street vendors in surviving the COVID-19 crisis in Hanoi, Vietnam, to name only some. Today, however, Ha will talk about the economic significance of informal alleyways, or in other words, how the spatial structure of informal neighborhoods contributes to their inhabitants' prosperity. And before I hand over, I'd like to highlight that after Ha's presentation, we will open up the plenum for questions and discussions. So if you have any question during the presentation, please write it in the chat so that we can address it afterwards. And with this, I'd like to hand over to Ha.
Cool. All right. So I'll keep my presentation within 40 minutes. But essentially what I'm trying to present today will be the research that I have conducted since 2016. This is the cause of my PhD research. And I have continued this research directions since then. So the topic that I will discuss today will be the economic significance of a often overlooked elements in the studies of cities, that is the alleyway, particularly the informally forms alleyways in a developing world city context. So I'll start the research with looking into the city that I know best, that is my hometown, Hanoi. So I have lived and grown up in Hanoi since I was 18 years old. So, I know it quite well. I work there, I live there. I have lots of friends there. My parents are there. So for those who don't know, Hanoi is the capital of Vietnam in Southeast Asia. It's a city characterized by high levels of urban informalities. So there is a lot of people do lots of different things to generate income, because they essentially can't fully rely on formal jobs. So people do all kinds of things to help themselves to survive in such a cities that is characterized by tortoise street networks. You might heard about the term shop house. In Hanoi, we call it tube house because the house very thin, narrow, informally built. So essentially, the city is a mess. All right, the picture like that will show you the overlooks of the first impressions of the built forms in the city. The house is tiny. Each building is like 3 meters wide and 20 meters long and 5-story, no elevator. Those are a kind of very popular building types in Hanoi, and connecting those buildings are the networks of public open spaces that are either very narrow streets or even narrower alleys and a laneway. So that is what I know about the city. So when I start to do more research about it, I ask myself what I don't know, and I'll start with trying to look back into the history of the cities and see how the city is formed. Hopefully that I can gain some understanding about it. Because when I live in the city, I'm a fish, living in the water. I can't see the color of the water, so I have to start stepping back and look at the city as an object. So I look at a series of his historic maps of Hanoi and picking up 5 most important maps that reflect the historical development of the city. So the first map that I pick up is 1973. And that is the first modern map ever in Hanoi. That is a map by French. In the past, Vietnamese people also map the city, but they look at the city differently. The map is not necessarily to scales. So I realized on the map made by French, who I believe that trying to quite objectively convey the physical forms of the city. So look at the maps. I tried to turn it into an axial line maps and trying to use space syntax to understand the urban configurations of the place and see what are the natures of the place. And I see that when running the space syntax analysis, I see that the city is clearly divided into 3 parts. Royal citadels is marked in the map B, the marketplace, marked as a catcher in the map B as well, and the river. So that is a 3 clear elements in the city in 1973, and that closely aligned with what is described in the historical book. And the space syntax clearly point out the central roles of the marketplace in the city at that time. So that is a place where all the Vietnamese people live and they conduct the trading. The Red River become the most important connections between the cities and the other city in the region. And they sit in between the citadel and the river. So essentially, that is a market where they sell things to other places, buy things from other places and sell it to people living in the citadel as well. The second map that I look at is Hanoi in 1902. That is the first map showing the city in the beginnings of French colonization period. And the map shows that the city is formalized and it had the citadels is no longer the citadels, the home of the royal family, but they're occupied by French and turned into French military camp. The Vietnamese quarter, now known as the old quarter, still get intact, but the street networks in that marketplace or Vietnamese quarter is now formalized. The French people built 2 new urban areas. One is the transition area around the lake, and they built a French quarter to the south of the lake as a place, as a home to a French officer and their family. So essentially the city is subdivided into parts, and the choice analysis show that the interface between each part is quite strong, and we start seeing that the high movement flows of things at that time. I believe that's a whole pushcarts and foot traffic mostly. Those are the key street that divide different sector, different quarter in the city. The French people also built a new bridge that connect the 2 sides of the city together, and that become something quite important in terms of trigger the urban developments in Hanoi at that times. Picking up the maps of city in 1956, that is the time the map showed the city at the end of French colonial period and at the beginnings of Vietnamese socialist governments. We see in the map B, we see 2 new urban centers established by French. So the north French quarter, the north side of French quarter, The street blocks are quite wide. Those are the place that has a lot of existing French government office. While to the south of French Quarter, the street blocks are narrower. Those are the places where French officer families used to live. So when they leave, they leave just those areas just intact, and even some of them are destroyed by the war, but essentially the grid is there. Lots of buildings there, and Vietnamese people just take over it. They live in it. They subdivide the building. They live in the office building, and then they turn it into some sort of collective living place. The city structure under the space syntax examination show that it starts to have some sort of deformed wheel structure. So I mark in the map A there as the second ring road start to appear. And in the 1990s, that structure become clearer. So the deformed wheel structure of Hanoi start to become clearer as it moved to what 1990s. That is the times at the beginnings of the economic reform policy. So between 1956 and 1990s, Vietnam is kind of a closed, Hanoi is a kind of a closed city. Vietnam has a very little connection to outside world. They are essentially like North Korea at the moment. But after 1990, they open door, they develop the city following the market economy, and that sort of trigger the developments of new urban area on the periphery of the city. Those are urbanized village. So those are the traditional village, but due to the influx of migration, there are more people living in the city. It becomes denser. It's no longer people living in the village no longer do agricultural work. They start subdivide the landlord, they sell it, build houses, urbanize. And during the 1990s, we see that period happening. In 2016, Hanoi is fully in sort of socially oriented market economies. In the city, we start seeing lots of new urban center, to name quite a few. First of all, they are Soviet-style collective housing quarter. I mark as a KTT in the maps. Those are living quarter built following Soviet sort of ideology. So people live in the shared building. They live in, so those are walk-up, 5-story walk-up buildings. People live in there, share toilet, share kitchen. There are also urbanized village, and interestingly, there are also new urban area built on the periphery as well. So the new urban area is a kind of a new settlements that built following modern European style, European thinking sort of settlements. This is very car friendly, right? So there are new urban area pop up in the city since 2016. So after the analysis, I kind of seeing, all right, so I have a better understanding of Hanoi's as the configurations of Hanoi. And space tech is really helpful in that sense. It helped me to kind of realizing what are the main street in the city, what are the main urban center, how the city structure changed from since 1973 to 2016, how new urban center pop up in the city and how important they are by just looking the color. But essentially, what the map that I built there is that I built the map using what is it? I built the map using the map that is released by are the local authority. So they are very simplified. Yeah. But then I think that when I look at the maps, I think that there are lots of street segments are not included in the map. The smaller secondary street, laneway, alleyways, walkways, a lot of things. I don't see my house in that maps. Yeah, I don't see the street running in front of my house. It's just, I just realized, look, there is a lot of street segments that I'm missing. So therefore, I start contacting lots of people and trying to find the survey maps. So if you ever are familiar with the planning system in developing world city, you know that those things are hidden, right? They're not, they've not published it. So I'm lucky enough to have to be able to find that map. So therefore I can build this, axial map of the city. I believe that I have included every single segment from smallest street, and I run the space syntax again. So that is a kind of the result that I have after rebuilding the axial maps and running the space syntax map. And I just quickly realized the problems. The problem is there are some cluster of street network, of street that is highly attractive to movement. So I just got two map areas over there, and the lower one is the one that at the south is a urbanized village, while the one at the north is the old quarter. So from my best understanding, the urbanized village are not that attractive to movement. Not everybody walk in there. There's the problem probably because there are so many short segments in that place compared to the old quarter. It's always vibrant. The people's always on the street 24/7. The second question I have is, how about motorbike? Hanoi is a city of motorbike, yeah? And the motorbike has a character that is a combination between car, that is formal, yeah, and pedestrian, that is quite informal. So how about motorbike? How to take motorbikes into account when we do the space syntax analysis? So here's a couple of images giving you an ideas about the build forms and the street life in Hanoi. The top one is the main street, and the left one is the urbanized village, while the right one is the old quarter. So you see that the top left image is the main street in the urbanized village compared to the top right image, that is the main street in the old quarter. The economic vibrance of the two places are very different. In the urbanized village, it's quite geary. It's not always that vibrant. If we look into the alleyway, the bottom left image is the alleyway in the former village compared to the bottom right image is an alleyway in the old quarter. We see, the significant difference between the two. So I come back to my question and ask, how can I solve it? How can I reflect this in the space syntax? I don't have movement count in the city, so I can't adjust it easily. So what is the best and simplest way to adjust it? So I come up with two solutions. The first one, in order to take motorbikes into account, I decided to combine integrations and choice measure. There is a simple functions in that space syntax, is somewhere in the space syntax methodology book. I just put the formula in, then bam, I got the outcome. But then when I do that, then I realize that, the former village, the street network in the former village get weaker, but still is very strong. So I decided to, first of all, normalize it by population density. So I just take the integration values and multiply it with the population density. It changed a bit. The other way is just to hit on the apply the segment length weighted measure, and boom, it gives the same result, very similar. So I decided to go with using the segment length weighted measure, and it works. From the literature review that I have, people argue that the longer the segment, the more door you have. The shorter the segment, the less door you have. So less movement generator or movement generator, or The longer segment, the easier you move. The shorter segment, more street corner, slower movement, that sort of thing. So I decided to combine the integration and choice measure in my maps, and I applied the segment length weighted measure in order to identify the main street in the city. So the next question that I have, what is the alleyway? Yeah, the alleyways, from my point of view, is as simple as the link between my home to the main street, somebody else's home to the main street. That is the alleyway. But the question is, what is a main street? So take the space syntax maps into account and adjust the threshold value. So kind of, dragging the bars in space syntax software. So all the line that has values higher than the threshold that I set, they will be black. All the line that has a value less than the threshold that I set, they will be white. So by doing so, I'll be able to identify the main street. In the map that I put over there, you can see that some lines are black, those are main street. This kind of calibration and adjustment. So it will give different results, but essentially I'll try to calibrate it in a way that I have main street in all the case study area that I look into. So bam, now I got the networks of main street. Just now look at the alleyway. Looking at the alleyway is more complicated because what I know about the alleyways in Hanoi is just they are very narrow, they're informally built. Some of them are very vibrant, some aren't. So I don't know why some of them are vibrant and some of them aren't. That's what I don't know. So I need to find someone who help me with it, to tell me why some places are vibrant and why some other places are not. I started the work with start mapping the alleyway. So I employed the morphological mapping. And morphological mapping, I follow the Constanian schools of urban morphology. It's give me a very structural frameworks of mapping the place, and I applied it. And it helps in terms of capturing the physical settings of the alleyway. It helped me to understand how they are built, how they are changed over the times. But I just don't know how to reveal the economic significance of that alleyways and how they inform people and to whom, it's significant, but to whom. Then I'll start talking to people who essentially live and work in the place. And the best research participant that I find is the home by business owner. They are the very active user of the alleyway. They use the alleyway all the times. They change it, they interact with it, they make it work for them. And for those home by business owner, home, is not only the place where they live and work, and the alleyway is not just, the street or right of way, it's also the working venue, is also the living room, is also the place where they meet other people. So they know the alleyway quite well. And they inform me, they let me know how some part of the alleyway work, and what are the barriers, what work for them, what won't. So when I mapped the alleyway, I find out a couple of morphologies of the alleyways. The easiest one, the clear one, is the one that on the ground. So two-dimensional alleyway, the one that, that include from walkway, small street, very narrow one, small pocket open space, that sort of thing. And I start mapping those places using axial lines as a guide that helped me to understand the distance from the home by business to the main street. The other type of morphology of the alleyway is a three-dimensional alleyway. Yeah. In Hanoi, there are people share the house. They live on the second floor, third floor of a shared building, and the stair, the walkway, the corridor, they're all publics, right? So you can enter a building and you never worry that someone gonna police you. So essentially, the space inside the building is just an extension of the public realm. When I look into the new high-rise building in new urban area, I just realized that it happened the same way. There is a lot of people living on the upper floor of the building, but they also conduct home by businesses, and the elevator it's just publicly accessible. There are very little control in terms of accessibility into those buildings. So it's a kind of characters of, informalities in Hanoi, and it applies in even very modern residential building as well. So my question is how to understand the alleyways and other variables that influence the feasibility of conducting some income generating activities at home. Why some household can conduct some home-based businesses while other cannot. So I start look at the alleyways that measured the distance between the home and the main street. Hopefully it will reveal something. And then I also map, some key space where there is a lot of home-based businesses. I try to map those places and trying to see what are the clue, what are the important things that allow them to do the businesses. So I end up with having quite like a large data set. So I map about 137 home-based businesses in 4 long-established neighborhoods. And the diagrams there is a place where it's kind of dump all the data together, trying to categorize them using topological distance, metric distance, categorize the business into type. And what I realized that, street front space, of course, they are very important, but they are only for business that involve direct customer contacts. For those who not necessarily require direct customer contact, they were not trying to stay on the street front because it's too expensive. The distance between 1 turns and 50 meters from the main street are the perfect range for the lower yield businesses. So if someone don't or can't generate a lot of income, they will prefer to be at that range. 2 turns is a very important impacts on the businesses, because after 2 turns, then people on the main street can't necessarily see the business, right? But still, there is a lot of business still can exist after 2 turns, even though they are invisible from the main street. But in order to be able to exist there, they had to stay at less than 50 meters from the main street. So 50 meter is very important metric threshold. And even for the off-ground home-based business, they also need to be located less than 50 meters from the main street. So 50 meters is something quite important that I realized. Even in the cities of Hanoi, where I used to think that motorbike is very important, the motorbike gonna blur the distance, because it's very easy to travel with a motorbike, and everybody in Hanoi can use motorbike. Still, 50 meters is very important. Being able to be close to the main street, not just topological, but metrical is a very important. So during the COVID-19 crisis, things changed. Things changed. Nobody on the street. The government forced to close informal market. They forced to close non-essential business. They forced to close. They are not allowed people to travel. Then the colors in the space syntax map just turn into black. There's no color. There's no red, no blue, no yellow whatsoever. They are all black. The street no longer play, or the movement or attractiveness of the streets no longer play the role. So I asked myself, what are the what will the laneways and the street will play in this sense? The image that you show is probably one of the very few occasions where people are allowed to be on the street, and they use the line, the dotted line, as a guide so people can keep the distance from each other to do the testing. So I asked myself, what will the informal business do? And in Hanoi, they used to lock down for a very long time. So I look at the cities, I look at the place that that performed very well during the pre-COVID period, And I see that people start employing some wartime strategies and tactics in order to survive. So when the cities are closed, when the district movement are closed and the government control with the barriers and checkpoint, then some small scale business still trying to expose themselves in the public by using some sort of, you see that they put the cardboards and signs and advertisements, even on the barrier, telling people that what they are selling. They depend on the networks of wholesalers who have permit to travel in the city, and then they somehow still get the goods, and then they're trying to sell it. But my question is, apart from just putting a notice like that, what can they do? And I come back to one of the cases that I used to observe earlier. That is one of the lady who just sit in the very narrow walkway in front of the blank wall and sell hot meal. So during the COVID-19, definitely the lady disappeared because she's not allowed to sit in the public place and conduct her livelihood. So the observations at that place reveal that the lady doesn't disappear. She just appears in a different way. She put a size on the wall where she used to sit, advertising what she sells. And then the staircase give her like a chamber of secret where she can stay there and tell the passerby what she's selling. And when the police officer, the patrols officer come through, she just disappear in the stair, just walk up the stair pretending nothing happened. So such thing happens because there are some spatial feature that allows the ladies to do such business. The empty wall, the space under the stairs, it offers something. So I believe that the spatial settings of the alleyway play a significant role in terms of allowing such activity to happen. And co-production in terms of delivering the service and co-production in terms of co-produce the place has been a very important feature in the city like Hanoi, where people not only spontaneously co-produce the place, but they also participate in delivering the service during the critical times. So here I conclude my presentations that with the diagrams pointing out a couple of elements that is often overlooked in either space syntax research and urban morphological mapping. So from the space syntax point of view, apart from the main street and secondary street that is appears in the formal maps, then all other that is informal, the street that exists or the walkway segment that exists within the landlord are not included in most cases. And while the morphological mappings and urban morphology include those, the space inside the building that is corridors and stairs and sometimes even the airspace above the building that allow people to extend the building, those things are often not included in the urban morphological study as well. So I don't know how we can include that into the software, the space syntax software that is so helpful in terms of helping us mappings and understanding the movement. I just pointed out here is that, look, there are some elements missing. Is there any way to include it? The second thing is the co-production practice that long as it's in the city, they're very important. It should be acknowledged, And finally, in my research, I always try to highlight that, look, urban plannings and inclusive city, modern urban planning practice should take into account those poor people, the people who, always be overlooked in either urban planning policies and in many cases, urban research. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.